Good morning, brethren, and welcome to our bi-weekly program entitled The Word in a Glimpse, which is broadcast live on Facebook every Monday and every Wednesday at 8 a.m. West Africa time, which is 7 a.m. GMT. Today is Monday, the 21st of August 2023, and our topic this morning is entitled Spiritual Danger of Physical Exhaustion, Part 5. Spiritual Danger of Physical Exhaustion, Part 5. So this is the continuation of the teaching that we started on the 7th of August, on Monday the 7th of August. You see, last Wednesday, we started talking of the solution to the spiritual danger of physical exhaustion. But before that, we said, when we read 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 to 4, and even other verses after that, we saw how physical exhaustion can endanger the spiritual life of somebody. We took the example of Prophet Elijah. Prophet Elijah spent a whole day draining out his physical strength. He first walked from Jezreel to Mount Carmel, and there in Mount Carmel, he prepared himself an altar. He built an altar to God himself without any help. He dug a trench all around the altar. He prepared the offering. He cut the bull for the offering in pieces himself without any help. He put the pieces on the altar. But before that, he first arranged the wood on the altar that he had built. Then he arranged the pieces on the altar. He set them in order. Then he prayed, and fire came from heaven and burned the sacrifice, burnt the pieces of the bull. After that, he asked the people who were there to seize all the 450 prophets of Baal, not letting any of them escape. Then he brought them to the brook that was there, and he slaughtered them himself, one by one. He spent all the time with a sword, slaughtering all those 450 prophets of Baal, which was strenuous. And after that, he climbed up to the top of Mount Carmel, where he prayed for the rain to come. And when rain came, he climbed down that Mount Carmel, and he ran faster than the chariot of King Ahab. Because he ran and he overpassed the chariot of King Ahab, and he continued running to the entrance of Jezreel. And when he arrived at his house, he was very, very exhausted. And we see what happened after that. Jezebel, King Ahab's wife, sent a messenger to tell him that on the next day she would have him killed, just as he killed the prophets of Baal. He was unable to reason wisely because of his physical exhaustion. Because if he had reasoned wisely, he would have noticed that if actually Jezebel wanted to kill him, he would have sent killers to just take off his life. He wouldn't have sent the message to tell him that tomorrow I will kill you. So he ran for his life. He ran because he didn't want to die. But then when he arrived in the wilderness, past Beersheba, he asked for death. He was running away to escape death. But then in the wilderness, he wanted to die. So what did he actually want? To die or not to die? So there was confusion in his mind because of that physical exhaustion. The physical exhaustion brings confusion in our mind. And apart from the fact that he couldn't think or reason wisely, apart from the fact that his mind was confused because of the physical exhaustion, but his vision was also blurred. He was convinced that he was the only prophet of the Lord who was left. Yet in the book of 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 13, he was informed that there were still 100 prophets of the Lord who were hiding in 2 caves, 50 in a cave. So he was not the only prophet left. And he was not the only Israelite who had not bowed down before Baal. There were still 7,000 people, apart from the 100 prophets of Baal. There were still 7,000 people in Israel who were faithful to the covenant that they had with God. They have not bowed down to Baal. So physical exhaustion darkens our minds. It prevents us from having logical and wise reasoning. It makes us doubt God's power and authority. It makes us lose our trust in God. It brings confusion in our minds, and it blurs our vision. And seventhly, it hinders our prayer life, because Elijah was unable even to pray wisely. Now, after that, we read Mark chapter 6. We're going to read it. Mark chapter 6, verses 7 to 13, then verses 30 to 32. Mark chapter 6, verses 7 to 13. And he is Jesus Christ, and he called the 12 to himself and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits. He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. Also, he said to them, in whatever place you enter a house, stay there till you depart from that place. And whoever will not receive you nor hear you, when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet as a testimony against them. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So they went out and preached that people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. Now, verses 30 to 33. Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and taught him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. You see, we said that God had rested on the 7th day when he created the whole universe. In fact, God didn't need to rest at all, but he wanted to sanctify that seventh day for man to rest on that day, because man needs rest. So God has designed times of rest for man. The first thing that God did for man to have rest was to make an official weekly day of rest, which is the Sabbath. God instructed to work 6 days every week and rest completely on the seventh day, on the Sabbath day. And on the Sabbath, man was meant to rest completely because he is the one for whom the Sabbath was made. And besides that day, let's first say that you may not have the opportunity to rest on the Sabbath day, but you can choose another day of the week for your rest. You must not work 7 days in a row without any rest. You have to have at least 1 day a week for rest. Now, besides the Sabbath, besides the official weekly day of rest that you have chosen, God has also instructed he has also instructed men to observe a break or a rest after every series of hard work, be it a physical work or a spiritual work. And every child of God, and especially every servant of God, must be aware of this. You see, when the apostles went to minister, when Jesus sent them to minister and to do all that they did, to teach and to heal the sick and to cast out demons from people, when they came back, they gave a report to Jesus of what they did. Jesus told them, now you have to rest. Don't continue working. Don't stay in the middle of the people and continue talking with them or continue working for them. Go and rest. Avoid a place where there is much going on and out, or going in and out, but go now to a place that is a place that is quiet for you to have rest. You see, Jesus instructed them to go aside and rest a while. It wasn't a Sabbath on that day, yet they had to rest. So apart from the rest on the Sabbath day, they also had to rest on that day. They needed rest to avoid physical exhaustion. So we always need rest to avoid physical exhaustion. We must be aware when our body starts being tired and have a break in what we are doing. Have a rest to avoid physical exhaustion so that we can avoid all the spiritual dangers of physical exhaustion. Now let's read Luke chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. Luke chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. Now it happened on a certain day that he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, let us cross over to the other side of the lake. And they launched out. But as they sailed, he fell asleep. And a windstorm came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in jeopardy. Now, let's also read Mark chapter 4, verses 37 and 38. Mark chapter 4, verses 37 and 38. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? You see, Jesus Christ himself also had times of rest. He was working very hard, ministering to the people. casting out evil spirits, healing the sick, teaching the word of God. Yet, he didn't do it continuously without any rest. So he had times of rest even though he is fully God and didn't need any rest. Yet as a human being, he needed rest. So we all know that God doesn't need, that God doesn't need a slumber or no sleep. Yet Jesus was also 100% man. He was 100% God, of course, but he also was 100% man. And as such, as a man, he needed some rest. This is why he always managed for himself times of rest. He managed for himself period of rest when nobody in need of him would ever disturb him. We see that, for example, when they were crossing the sea, the lake, in the boat where they were, he arranged a place for him to sleep, to rest, to have rest. He set a pillow there and he was sleeping on that pillow because he needed rest. He needed much rest. So every servant of God needs to manage for himself some times of rest to avoid excessive fatigue, to avoid physical exhaustion. You see, Jesus Christ is our model. Jesus Christ showed us the way that we must follow. Jesus Christ, being God, didn't need any rest at all, but being man, he needed rest. He needed rest. And he managed himself times of rest just to show us the way, to show us what to do. Remember, when John the Baptist had to baptize him, John the Baptist didn't want to baptize him. He said, "No, I'm not the one to baptize you, but you are the one to baptize me." Yet Jesus told him, "Let's do what is right. You have been sent to baptize people. Let me show the example so that people can accept to be baptized. Let's do what is right." In the same way, concerning rest, Jesus Christ didn't need rest at all because he was 100% God. He could stay like that, ministering on and on without resting. He wouldn't feel any physical exhaustion. Yet he managed himself times of rest because he wanted to show us what is right. He wanted us to do what is right. And what is right is to have times of rest, to avoid physical exhaustion, to avoid excessive fatigue. And this, every servant of God must know and must imitate his model, Jesus Christ, must do as Jesus Christ did, must do what is right. So, dear brethren, for us to avoid the spiritual danger of physical exhaustion, we have to avoid being exhausted, being physically exhausted. For that, we have to manage ourselves times of rest. When you feel that your body is no more responding, rest. When you feel that you are being seriously tired, rest a bit. Have a break in what you are doing. Dear brethren, God bless you beyond all your expectations, and have a very, very wonderful working week. Yet, don't forget to manage yourselves, times of break, times of rest.